of Religious Liberty and Public Education. I'm Chris Surprenant, Assistant Professor of Philosophy here at the University of New Orleans and the Director of the Alexis de Tocqueville Project in Law, Liberty, and Morality. The Tocqueville Project was established to examine enduring questions in the history of Western moral and political thought. In this mission, we are assisted by a number of organizations who make our work possible, including the University of New Orleans College of Liberal Arts, Media and Technology Services here at the University of New Orleans, the UNO Student Government, the Institute for Humane Studies at George Mason University, the Charles Koch Foundation, and a number of private donors, and we're thankful very much for all of their support. Today we examine what role, if any, can or should religion serve in public education. For many folks in our country today, the answer to this question is simple. Given the existence of a separation of church and state in the United States, the role that religion should serve in public education is none. But those on the other side see this issue as one of liberty. If I'm a parent and I want my child to be in a school with a religious affiliation, and there are significant others in my community that want to have their children attend the same kind of school, then why shouldn't the tax dollars taken from me to support public education be used to support this kind of institution? Our three panelists today all approach this position from slightly different directions. First, William Jeynes. Professor Jeynes, to my left, is a professor of teacher education in the College of Education at California State University, Long Beach. He holds graduate degrees from Harvard University and the University of Chicago. He's the author of over 135 academic articles and 11 books, all examining the various factors that influence academic success. He has been a consultant for both the United States and South Korean governments, and his four-point plan presented to the acting president of South Korea became the core of that nation's 1998 economic stimulus legislation, which helped it emerge from the greatest economic crisis that we've seen in Asia since World War II. Next to Bill is Barbara Forrest. Professor Forrest is a professor of philosophy at Southeastern University in Hammond. She received her PhD in philosophy from Tulane University and has taught at Southeastern since 1998. With biologist Paul Gross, she is the co-author of Creationism's Trojan Horse, published by Oxford University Press in 2004. In it, she examines the goals and strategies of the intelligent design movement and its attempt to undermine the teaching of evolutionary biology. Forrest serves on the board of directors of the National Center for Science Education, the board of trustees of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association. To her left, and finally, is Stephen Harvey. Mr. Harvey is a partner in the litigation department of Pepper Hamilton LLP, a law firm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 2005, he served as co-lead counsel for the plaintiffs in Kitzmiller versus Dover Area School District, the landmark case testing the constitutionality of teaching intelligent design in public school science class. As a result of his work in this area in 2005, he was awarded the Clarence Darrow Award from the National Center for Science Education, and in 2006, he was awarded the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Pro Bono Award and the Civil Libertarian of the Year Award from the ACLU's Philadelphia, Pennsylvania chapter. Please join me in welcoming our guests to UNO. So, Steve, where do we start?
Okay. Well, it's good to be here at the University of New Orleans. It's quite a pleasure and an honor. And I'm going to share with you some very valuable advice right now. You might want to write this down for those of you who are going to go on in a legal career. And it's a two-word answer to any legal question that can be posed to a lawyer. And it's always correct. And those two words are, it depends. I wanted to start this off on a humorous note, but I'm actually being quite serious about that. Law is it's a complex field, and there's a lot of, it all depends on the context. So the application of legal principles depends on what the factual situation is. But legal principles themselves are not always fixed. They are malleable. There are some legal principles that are fixed, but many of them are broad, and they themselves depend, the application of them and how they work depend on the context. This is very true in the area of constitutional law. You sometimes hear people talk about the Constitution as if you can look to it and it'll provide a quick answer to any question we're asking ourselves as a society about how we address some problem. There are things, as I said, that are clear. It's clear that the president has a 4-year term. It's clear that each state gets 2 senators. It's clear that to be a member of the House of Representatives, you have to be 25 years old and have to have been a citizen for 7 years. There are some things in there that are very clear and specific. But then there's other things in there like due process of law and concepts of establishment of religion and freedom of speech. These are very broad concepts and that do not lend themselves to quick answers to difficult questions facing our society. And so what we're left with is what I would call constitutional values. These are values that are embedded in these concepts, and we try our best to understand and apply those values on a going forward basis when we have cases. In the area of religion, there's some very specific textual language in the Constitution. It's in the First Amendment. It's in the very beginning of the First Amendment. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So that's the very beginning of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and presumably it's first because it's important, perhaps, or most important, primary. And those two concepts that are in that I just quoted to you, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That's what's referred to as the Establishment Clause. And then it goes on to say, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's called the Free Exercise Clause. And those are two very different concepts. The Establishment Clause is the idea that, at the very least, the government can't establish a state religion. We don't have, it's not like England, where we have the Church of England. We don't have the Church of America. But it means a lot more than that, and it's come to mean a lot more than that. It's the idea that there is a separation of church and state, that the state, the government, doesn't promote religion. It doesn't take sides in matter of religion. And then the free exercise concept is a little different. That's the idea that you can exercise your religion freely. You can go to whatever church you want. You can decide what you're going to pray in church or not pray in church. You can decide on your rituals. Now, these aren't absolute. Most rights aren't absolute because, for example, maybe you can't smoke cannabis in public as part of your religion. You can't engage in human sacrifice, even though there's maybe there are some religions that actually do espouse those things. So there are limits on these concepts. So those are the two big, broad concepts. And what I'm going to talk about right now comes under the Establishment Clause, because that's where it comes up in schools, is the Establishment Clause. We've seen 2 lines of cases over the years that have been quite controversial. The first line of cases is the prayer in schools line of cases. And I think everybody knows that in the early 1960s, the Supreme Court held that you can't have prayer or Bible readings in public schools. That was a case that came right out of Pennsylvania. And then over the years, that's been expanded and followed so that you can't have prayer, for example, at public middle school and high school graduations. And you can't have a moment of silence because that's just designed to promote religion. That's what the court has said. So that's that one line of cases. But the line of cases that I've been much more involved with, and this is how I got to know Barbara initially, was the line of cases having to do with evolution. And that's been a primary focus of mine as a lawyer and through the Kitzmiller case. Now, in the evolution area, everything begins in 1859 with Charles Darwin's seminal work on the origin of species by means of natural selection. That's where Darwin set forth the theory of evolution with all its particulars and all his supporting evidence for it. But he had actually figured it out 20 years before that, and he had kept it a secret for a long time. And the reason he kept it a secret was because he knew that it would shock the social and political world of his day. Darwin was, of course, English, so he was concerned with affairs in England. And he probably couldn't have seen that its greatest controversy would be here in the United States, not in England. And the most famous case is still the Scopes monkey trial of 1925, which was made famous by Hollywood in the movie Inherit the Wind. It's the story of John Scopes was a Tennessee school teacher who was prosecuted criminally for teaching evolution. And most people, as I said, know the movie, but what they forgot is that Scopes lost that case and that he was convicted. And that it was legal in this country for states to prohibit the teaching of the scientific theory of evolution until 1968 in the Supreme Court's decision of Epperson versus Arkansas. The court said you couldn't do that. And then following Epperson, religiously motivated opponents of evolution began to teach something called creation science. They said it was biblical creationism dressed up to look like science. And the courts addressed that in a couple cases, but it did make it to the Supreme Court in 1987 in a case coming out of Louisiana. And that case involved the Louisiana Balanced Treatment Act, or Balanced Treatment Statute, that said that if you're going to teach evolution in school, you can do that, but you have to balance it by teaching creation science alongside of it. And the court said that creation science is not science, it's religion, and you can't promote it that way in public schools. And so then the same, or very similar, the same group of people, religiously motivated opponents of evolution, moved on to their next idea, which was intelligent design. And we'll talk just a little bit about what intelligent design is here today. But let me tell you, the claim is that it's a scientific argument, not a religious argument, that there is proof in the natural world of the existence of an unknown, unnamed, intelligent designer who's responsible for the universe and nature and all things natural. And I want to be very clear what it's not. It's not theistic evolution. Many people, myself included, as a personal matter, this is my personal view, believe that, have a belief in a higher power and belief in God, and believe that the two are essentially compatible. You can believe in evolution and you can believe in God. Those are two different ways of explaining. One is a scientific explanation for the universe. The other one is a theological explanation. And that's the view of most. It's the view of the Catholic Church. It's the view of most of the mainstream Protestant denominations. It's the view of many, many religious people. But let's not be confused here. That's not what intelligent design is. Intelligent design is essentially contending that evolution is either unproven or it's wrong. So I've only got a couple more minutes here, but let's fast forward to June of 2004 at a school board meeting in Dover, Pennsylvania. I challenge you to trace your roots to the monkey you came from. 2,000 years ago, someone died on a cross. Can't someone take a stand for him? This country wasn't founded on Muslim beliefs or evolution. It was founded on Christianity, and our students should be taught as such. Those were all statements that were said at a public school board meeting in Dover, Pennsylvania in June of 2004, as the school board began its policy of debating the subject of how they're going to deal with the biology curriculum. And what they ultimately decided in the fall of that year was this intelligent design policy, that students would be presented with the concept of intelligent design in class. And Barbara's going to talk a little bit more about intelligent design in that case, but I just want to tell you what our strategy was in that case. In the few minutes I have we'll have plenty of time to talk about these in response to questions. But we set out to prove the First Amendment is concerned with religion. It's not concerned with bad science education. So if this was just bad science, it's not illegal to have bad science or bad English or bad philosophy or any of those other things. It's just not good education. So it wasn't sufficient for us to prove that intelligent design is bad science. We had to prove that it's religion. And we set out to do that in several different ways. First of all, because it's largely an attack on evolution, and it repeats many claims about evolution that have been made over the years, spurious claims, I might add, lack of support in the fossil record, hasn't been proven, all kinds of flaws and gaps and problems, supposedly. So what we did was we put on evidence at trial, really powerful evidence, of how evolution is accepted as the dominant explanation for the forms and diversity of life on Earth. And that evidence is truly powerful. It's the National Academies of Sciences, and it's virtually the entire community of people who teach and work in the area of biological sciences. And through leading scientists who came to testify at trial, we disproved those claims, and we proved that evolution is the dominant theory. Because if it's not science, then it must be something else, such as religion. And then we put on evidence, and in fact, we did prove that the board intended to promote religion and then lied to conceal its purpose. Because the board members, some of the board members, later claimed that all those statements that I just quoted to you that were repeated in the newspapers, and several newspapers over and over, they said, we never said those things. We proved that they did say those things. And then finally, we put on evidence of the historical and current context of intelligent design. And we did that through a very leading professor of philosophy from Southeastern Louisiana University, who's sitting to my right. So that was our strategy at trial. And let me just finish by telling you this, what happened at the end of the trial. It was the very last day of trial. I had to put a witness on that morning, was the final witness of the case. He was a biologist for the other side. So I had to do my cross-examination. I was up very late preparing for that. My colleague, Eric Rothschild, delivered the closing argument. And then after that was done, after the closing argument was done, Judge John E. Jones III, who was the trial judge in the case, he thanked the audience because the courtroom was packed every single day. He thanked the press. He thanked the lawyers. And then he said, now if there's nothing more, and he was about to say that the trial's over, and just then Patrick Gillen rose. Patrick Gillen was the lawyer for the school district. And Pat said, Your Honor, I just have one thing I couldn't help but notice. I looked in my calendar and I couldn't help but notice that today is the 40th day since this trial began, and tonight will be the 40th night. And I just want to know if you did that on purpose. And Judge Jones then said these words, which are the final words in the trial transcript. He said, Mr. Gillen, I can assure you that is an interesting coincidence, but it was not by design. And on that, I'll turn it over to one of my colleagues.
Good.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here, and I'd like to thank Chris for inviting me. It gives me any excuse to get to visit with Steve again is always a pleasure, and a pleasure to meet Professor Jeynes. I'm going to actually sort of provide the historical context for what Steve was talking about, and that is that when it comes to teaching creationism, in virtually every case in which these cases have wound their way into the courts, the motivation behind all of them has always been religion, and so. In no case has the teaching of creationism been motivated by scientific advancement or anything like that. It's always been religion. So just very quickly to refer to a couple of the things that Steve already mentioned. In 1968, the Supreme Court struck down the laws in various states that banned the teaching of evolution. Of course, and the banning of evolution was for religious reasons, and the court said you can't do that. You can't ban the teaching of evolution because people object to it on the basis of religion, so you can't do that. In 1986, the case that came out of Louisiana was the Edwards versus Aguillard case. The Supreme Court said, well, you also can't teach creation science alongside evolution. And of course, the Louisiana law was motivated specifically by a desire to put a religious view into the public school science class. And so the court said, well, not only can you not ban the teaching of evolution, but you cannot require teachers to teach creationism in a public school. And so then, after that case in 1987, then creation science morphed into intelligent design. A small group of people who eventually began working together decided that they had to promote it as something other than creationism. So what they did was to exclude the idea that the earth is very young, exclude the idea of Noah's flood, keep pretty much everything else intact, and call it intelligent design. And that was an explicit response to the court decision in 1987. And so you get creationism in the form of intelligent design, and it was being promoted beginning in 1996 by a think tank in Seattle called the Discovery Institute. So that's kind of a short history of how religion has brought court cases, and the court has ruled on that rationale. So then we get the Kitzmiller case, okay, in which both Steve and I were involved. Now, as Steve has mentioned by giving you those very vivid quotes, the school boards, this was a very small town school board. It's a large consolidated school district. It's a regional district, but it had a board of, what, 15 people?
Yes.
15 people. And so the school, in the school board's motivation was explicitly religious. In other words, what the school board wanted to do was to present intelligent design as an alternative scientific theory. And this it was not motivated by any scientific knowledge on the part of the board members or a request because they didn't have any. I mean, they were remarkably uninformed about the science, and the judge noted that in his decision. There were no requests by teachers for this, no requests by scientists or anything like that. It was strictly members of the school board who had religious objections to evolution and wanted something else presented along with it. And so when the Discovery Institute found out about this, they were very upset. They objected to the policy, not because they disagreed with the motivation of the school board, but because the policy explicitly mentioned intelligent design. And of course, they knew that there would be legal dangers from mentioning intelligent design in the policy, because it is, as the work of many people, including myself, had established, was that intelligent design in the descriptions of its own proponents is religious. It's an explicitly religious program. It's based on the Discovery Institute's fellows' own descriptions of it. And so the Discovery Institute's fears were borne out in court because the school board lost the case. And so what I had to do was to present the evidence in court. It was my job to present the evidence to the judge. This was a bench trial, by the way. There was no jury. It was just the judge would make the decision himself. So what I had to do was to provide to the judge the evidence that intelligent design is religion, that it is creationism. That was my job. And so I brought out a number of things. I mean, there was just a pile of evidence that we could have used, so we culled it down to certain things. So between my expert witness report and my testimony in court, I brought out things like the following, and these are just a very few. The Discovery Institute established in 1996, they established a subsidiary called the Center for the Renewal of Science and Culture in 1996. They had actually been preparing to do that a few years before. And in 1995, the people who would become the fellows of the Center for the Renewal of Science and Culture held a conference on the campus of Southern Methodist University. This was 1992. And it was entitled Darwinism, Science or Philosophy. And there were people who supported intelligent design there, and then there were people who were, scientists and people like that. And in 3 years after that meeting, in 1995, Mark Hartwig, one of the people who later became one of the Discovery Institute's fellows, wrote an article in a religious magazine. It was called Moody's Magazine. It was published by the Moody Bible Institute, I think was the name of the organization. And in that article, he explicitly talked about creationists. It was creationists who were at this meeting, creationists who were promoting intelligent design. In other words, they were very clear and upfront about who they were and what they were doing. And so that was one of the earliest pieces of evidence that I had to present to show that in the minds of the people of the Discovery Institute, they are creationists and they were promoting creationism, but they couldn't do it overtly using that term. And then a few years later, in 1999, one of the movements, the intelligent design movement's leading promoters, a philosopher like myself, William Dembski, wrote in a religious magazine called Touchstone. Touchstone, I think the subtitle is A Journal of Orthodox Christianity. He described intelligent design in that magazine as it's just the Logos theology of John's Gospel restated in the idiom of information theory. Okay, so that's pretty clear. It's pretty clearly in the mind of its leading intellectual a religious idea. And then 1 year later, Philip Johnson was an attorney who kind of galvanized the movement and became the central figure, the advisor. He was the older guy, the elder, who was the advisor to the younger gentleman. He was being, 2000 was the year after the Kansas Board of Education stripped evolution out of their science standards. And the Discovery Institute got involved in that. That was their first really big public profile. They really surfaced publicly in that case. And so he was interviewed by Ted Koppel, if anybody remembers him. Ted Koppel on something like, I don't know what the show was, came on at night. And he was asking Philip Johnson to clarify what intelligent design is. You call it a scientific theory. And Johnson said very clearly, it's a theory of divine creation, right? So that was in 2000. And so shortly after that, and I think it was about that time, I began writing an article based on a document that had surfaced on the internet. It was called the Wedge document. You may have heard of it. It was a document that was written in-house by the Discovery Institute. It was a fundraising document, and it laid out what they called the Wedge strategy, which was a 20-year program for the promotion of intelligent design, including getting it into public schools. It was never intended for public distribution, but a guy leaked it. He made a copy, and it got leaked onto the internet, which is where it became publicly available. And so those of us who were already interested in the subject of creationism began looking at that document, and it actually formed the basis of my book. And so in that document was one of the things I had to do in court was to walk the judge through that document. And one of the things that's very clearly stated in it, it begins with the statement that God created man in his own image. And one of the things that is the goal of the Discovery Institute was to displace modern science in the sense that it deals only with natural explanations, right? Materialistic explanations, which is what science does. What they wanted to do was to replace materialistic science with a science consonant with Christian and theistic convictions. So all through that document is more evidence that in the minds of the proponents of intelligent design, it is an explicitly religious idea, and that they're promoting it. And then finally, one of the things I had to do was, and this was a job I got on top of my first expert witness report, we discovered that there was a textbook, right, of pandas and people, and we found evidence that that book was really, it was published as the first intelligent design high school textbook. It was published in, I forget what year was it, 98? Yes. 98. But it actually had started out as a creationism book. And we found a lot of evidence for that in the forms of earlier drafts of the book. And so some of the evidence that I presented in court had to do with that. And if you looked at the older manuscripts of the book, you could see that it was written in explicitly creationist language. Creationist biologists, creationism, creation science. And when computers were, began to be used widely, and after the Edwards decision in 1987, the drafts were changed. So you could go into the computer and very easily change words, and so that's what they did. And after the 1987 Supreme Court ruling, we had a manuscript, we had a copy, in which somebody, using one of those old dot matrix printers, you remember those? Oh, you guys are mostly too young to remember those, right? But anyway, someone had gone in to do a search and replace, right, to get rid of all the uses of the word creationism and replace it with intelligent design. And there was one case where the word creationists, plural, was, there, and someone was in a really big hurry, I guess, and they were going to replace creationists with design proponents, but they didn't proofread, and it came out as co-design proponentsists, right? Okay. And believe it or not, we didn't use that in court. Really, we didn't use it in court, we just had so much stuff, we didn't really need it, but it would have really been funny to do it. Okay. But I claim that as my discovery because I'm the one that found it sitting in my office at Southeastern. Okay, so anyway, that was my job, was to show the judge all of that evidence, to establish it in their own words, in the minds of its own proponents, that intelligent design is creationism. It is grounded in religion, and not only religion, but sectarian Christian religion. Okay, so let's fast forward, since I only have about 5 minutes left. Let's fast forward. After the Dover decision, the Discovery Institute knew that they could not promote intelligent design using that term. So the changes that we've been talking about, you've noticed there have been changes in terminology. And so in the wake of legal decisions, creationists always change their tactics, and the tactics always include a change in terminology, and that's what happened after Kitzmiller. So after Kitzmiller, what the Discovery Institute decided to do was to promote quote-unquote academic freedom. They can't promote intelligent design using that term anymore, and they certainly can't promote creationism. So they began promoting promoting academic freedom, which, to tell the truth, is a very old creationist strategy. The 1981 Balanced Treatment Act was written as a defense of academic freedom, and the Supreme Court explicitly rejected that rationale. So we had seen it before, but they began to use euphemisms, code terms, academic freedom, strengths and weaknesses of evolution, arguments for and against evolution, things like that. And so in 2008, actually before that, a couple of years before that, Discovery Institute began promoting a model academic freedom statute. The full name is a Model Academic Freedom Statute on Evolution. Notice it says nothing about intelligent design. And their model statute, their model legislation doesn't have that term in there. But it's a direct outgrowth. It's part of the historical context of the promotion of creationism and then intelligent design. But as a result of their promotion of that model bill, in a number of states, Louisiana passed a bill that was based on that idea, and it's the Louisiana Science Education Act. It was enacted in 2008, so it's been in effect for 5 years. And it's like all of the other cases that have in which creationism has been promoted. The motivation and the people who were promoting this, it was exclusively religious. There were no teachers asking for this. There were no scientists asking for this. The only people who promoted this bill, and they worked with the Discovery Institute to do it, was the Louisiana Family Forum, which is an affiliate, the Louisiana affiliate of Focus on the Family, which is a religious organization that had been promoting creationism for a long time on their website and in letters to the editor and things like that. So this was like the Dover case and earlier cases in that the only motivation was religious objections to the teaching of evolution. Only they couldn't write that into the bill for legal reasons. So, but they were the only group that promoted it, requested it, and worked to get it passed. So it was not done by anybody who was responding to any scientific advancements or anything like that. In fact, one of the notable features of the testimony of people affiliated with that group is that they don't know any science. And so the religious reasons were quite clear. So one of the things that Steve just mentioned is that there are certain kinds of cases that don't raise religious questions, right? And so I thought I would close out by pointing out how the National Center for Science Education looks at two different lines of attack on the teaching of science. The National Center for Science Education was established almost 30 years ago now in response to attacks on the teaching of evolution. So that's mostly what we've done. I'm on their board, so I say we. But now we've added a climate science component. We've added it at the request of many scientists in that community of scientists. And one of the interesting things is there are distinct differences in the motivation behind objections to evolution and objections to teaching climate science. But the lines of argument against teaching evolution and against teaching climate science are remarkably similar. So I'll give you the similarities, but then I'll tell you what the notable difference is. So the National Center for Science Education has a web page now devoted to climate science, and one of our staff has really drawn up a nice analysis of the similarities in the ways people object to teaching both evolution and climate science. So there are three pillars to each one, three pillars, three lines of support that people who object, three kinds of arguments they make. So the pillars of creationism, pillar number one, a standard creationist claim, is that evolution is a theory in crisis. There's a similar pillar in climate change denial. Climate change is bad science, right? The second pillar in the pillars of creationism is the creationist claim number two, is that evolution equates to atheism. Pillar number two in the climate change denial is that the acceptance of climate change is driven by radical ideological motivations and leads to undesirable social consequences. So again, there's some similarity there. And then the third pillar, the pillar of creationism, is that it's only fair to teach both sides. And then the third pillar in climate change denial is that it's only fair to acknowledge a scientific controversy over climate change. So the pillars of support are remarkably similar, but there's one big difference. And the National Center for Science Education, we have fashioned the information we present and the way we help people who contact us based on this difference. And that is that the objections to teaching evolution are exclusively religious. Right? Once in a while, you'll find somebody who says, no, my objections are not religious. But in every significant case we have had, the objections have been religious. But that's not the case with the denial of climate change. There are a few people who have religious reasons. For example, Congressman Shimkus in the United States Congress said that he rejects climate science because God promised after Noah's flood he would never destroy the earth again. But that's not typically what you hear. The objections are mostly from the standpoint of economic policy, right? Okay, so they're really, when you're dealing with teaching climate science, you're really not dealing with things that could produce a First Amendment case. So that's one major difference between these two, the two approaches. So when it comes to the teaching of evolution, religion is very much a factor. It always has been. And so we recognize that and handle it a bit differently than at the National Center for Science Education than we do with climate science. Okay, so thank you very much.
My name is Bill Jeynes, and I'm so happy to be here. I've gotten to meet some of you beforehand. So delighted to meet Steve and Barbara, and thank you so much for inviting me. Now, the topic of our time together is religious liberty and public education. That's a very, very broad topic. And you've just heard for about 35 minutes or so about intelligent design and evolution, but this is a much, much broader topic than simply evolution and intelligent design. And as Steve, I think, so eloquently suggested, I mean, there are different views on evolution and intelligent design. There's some people who believe that evolution occurred and it was all by chance. Steve's view appears to be he's very much a person of faith. He sees no contradiction between evolution and what is laid out in the Bible, so that's theistic evolution, okay, a God-driven evolution. There are some people who believe that it's a combination between creation and evolution, and then there's some people who simply believe in creation or intelligent design, call it what you will. But this is a much broader topic, this idea of religious liberty and public education, and my interests are really in a much broader set of corridors. And let me share a little bit about myself so that you can understand how I came to become interested in this. And I was raised in the inner city of New York City, and we were, for the most part, under the poverty line and lived in very much a gang-ridden area of New York. And I was raised as an atheist, okay? I'll admit that to you. The first 18 years of my life, I was an atheist. My mom was an atheist, single-parent family, and so forth. And but even as an atheist, I was interested in watching many of the people around me, because obviously in the inner city, especially in a gang-dominated area like we were in, there's some people who, in spite of everything, somehow they manage to overcome the odds that are against them, and then other people don't. I mean, for example, and it's hard, unless you've been raised in the inner city, a lot of times it's hard to relate. But, for example, my very first full-time job was my partner, the person as a stock boy that I worked with primarily, was the former head of the Savage Skulls, which at the time was the most feared gang in New York City. And, in fact, I remember being introduced by the boss to the fellow I was going to work with, and he said, I have some concerns about you working with him because he just got out of prison for murder, and you might feel, uncomfortable because he was this gang leader, okay? And so anyway, his name was Eddie, and I asked Eddie, about his background, and in fact, Eddie even asked me before I asked him, and he said, well, did the boss tell you about my background? And I said, yeah, you did commit murder, and you just served in prison, and he was trying to help you to get your life together. And then Eddie said, well, how many did he say I killed? And I said, oh, just one. He said, oh, no, that's wrong. He said, I've killed 6. And and I took the job, and we developed a friendship. And the way we developed a friendship is, in essence, as you might imagine, he had a bit of a temper, to say the least, okay? I mean, if you kill 6 people, usually you have an issue with having a bad temper. And there was a person at our workplace who did not like him, who thought that I would do Eddie's work for him, which was really true. I really wanted to help Eddie. He really, he was not used. This was the first job he had ever had. And I knew that if the boss ever found out about how little work he was doing, Eddie would get fired, and God knows what he would do. So I really tried to help him out. And yes, many times I would cover up for him. And a lot of the boss didn't see it, but a lot of the coworkers did. And they'd say, hey, this isn't fair. Eddie's getting paid more than you are, and you're doing 80% of the work. But I really did not want to see Eddie get fired. But there was one who really picked on him the most for this, and it would get Eddie enraged, and Eddie would want to kill him. And he'd say, Bill, I just feel like taking his head and bang, 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 against the wall. And the way we developed a friendship is I would talk him out of it. Whenever he would feel like killing this guy, I would talk him out of it. And so, in a nutshell, that's largely, and I took care of my mom since the age of 8. I was, the only child, and in essence, I had to take care of her rather than the other way around. And that was my background. And then I began to look, again, still being an atheist, at the various people around me who, despite the odds, would overcome the inner city. And I began to become interested in faith and family issues because I began to realize the place of faith and family in enabling many people to overcome the disadvantages of the inner city. And what I do now is I am a researcher, I am a professor, and I work with Cal State Long Beach in California and also the Witherspoon Institute located on the campus of Princeton. And I work with these and I do quantitative research. And I do statistical analysis, 2 types especially. One type is called meta-analysis. Okay, now let me explain what meta-analysis is, because I don't feel bad if you haven't heard of it before. What a meta-analysis is you combine all the studies that have been done on a particular topic, and it often takes 3 years to do this, because I mean everything. I use 60 search engines, to find all these studies throughout the world. And then what a meta-analysis does is it combines all of these into a huge data set and gives an indication about what the overall body of research indicates. So that's why I've spoken at the White House a number of times, and I've worked with both the Obama and Bush administration and former members of the Clinton administration, because they're very interested, because who in the government has time to read all these studies if you can come along and say this is what the overall body of research indicates. And I also do analysis using nationwide data sets. So that's in essence what I do. Now, I just shared that I was an atheist and my mom was an atheist, and that was the environment in which I was raised. But even my mom, as an atheist, she said to me, you know what, Bill, even though I'm an atheist, I believe it's very important for a person to have a working knowledge of the Bible in order to be considered an educated individual. So this is one of my primary concerns. I am concerned about, I think that the Bible as literature should be taught in the public schools, that this is very important for a well-rounded education, that the Bible is the most published and the most influential book historically in the United States, and arguably even the world, and that it is very important for people to understand its contents. And not only to know what is in the Bible, but also to understand the contents of some of the masterpieces of literature. Because for so many years, centuries in fact, writers from 4 continents assumed that the readers had at least a working knowledge of the Bible. For example, Shakespeare just alone cites the Bible 1,300 times. And if you are to know Shakespeare, if you're to understand a lot of what he says, it's very important to have a working knowledge of the Bible. And the same might be said regarding Charles Dickens, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, various titles including The Grapes of Wrath and so forth. And in fact, a meta-analysis has been done on the relationship between Bible literacy and academic achievement, and it shows a very strong positive relationship, that those high in Bible literacy have GPAs on average that are more than one full grade point ahead of those low in Bible literacy. So, and I think all of us, whether we be parents or future parents or what have you, or just students, we'd much prefer to come home with an A- average and a C+ average, and that's basically the difference that emerged in the study. So that certainly is one reason why I think we should have the Bible as literature taught in the public schools, that it's hard to imagine how a person could be educated unless they have at least a working knowledge of the Bible. A second reason why I think the Bible as literature should be taught in the public schools is that the U.S. Supreme Court has declared that the teaching of the Bible as literature in the public schools is constitutional. In fact, quoting from Abington versus Shemp in 1963, it said, "It is permissible as long as the Bible is presented objectively and as part of a secular program of education." And because of this, 9 states now in the United States, and it's ever increasing, have passed bills, or in one case, a resolution allowing for the Bible as literature to be taught. And even the American Civil Liberties Union has acknowledged that as long as it remains within the context of the Abington versus Shemp quote that I just cited, that it is constitutional. And so also, if you include parts of states that have the Bible as literature in the schools, there are 43 states that are at least beginning to have the Bible as literature in the public schools. A third reason why I think we should have the Bible as literature taught in the public schools is that a knowledge of the Bible will help one understand the history of 6 inhabited continents, certainly our own history. But let's face it, I mean, there have been a lot of Christians throughout history, and many of them acted in reference to certain portions of the Word of God. Even in terms of our own history, for example, I mean, you take the Puritans, who were clearly religious people, and they founded Harvard and Yale and Dartmouth and, so many of the Ivy League institutions, and they clearly, were highly religious and so forth. And whether you be talking about the influence of George Washington's prayer book on his life, what he testifies to be an, in quotes, miracle at the French and Indian War that was a turning point in his life, or whether you talk about the Civil Rights Movement and the fact that Martin Luther King was a Baptist minister and how that affected him in his quest for equal rights. Whatever issue you'd be talking about, a lot of times Christianity or the Bible was an important factor. And then the fourth reason why I believe we should have the Bible as literature in the public schools is because a knowledge of the Bible will enhance our understandings of other people of faith generally, even including those of other religions. Now, the reality is it's very interesting to look at the demographic patterns of Christianity around the world because, for example, many of the places that prohibited Christianity years ago are now the places where Christianity is growing the fastest. For example, China. Many people are calling it the greatest, in quotes, spiritual renewal of modern times because China now has approximately, I mean, the estimates go from a low of 65 million all the way up to 135 million. But even if we take the mean of that or the median of that at about 100 million, the best estimates are that China has about 100 million Christians. In fact, the prediction is that in the next 5 or 10 years, China will surpass us as having the highest Christian population. Of course, they have a much larger population overall, but that's a lot of Christians for a place that under Mao's influence, Christianity was repressed. But this is what's happening in many former communist lands. Same thing happening in Hungary. Hungary is now placed to one of the largest churches in the world. In fact, the largest church in Europe, believe it or not, is in Budapest, Hungary. 120,000 members. The Ukraine, which used to belong to the Soviet Union, now is a church of 30,000 members. And in fact, half of the largest churches in the world are in South Korea, including one that for 30 years peaked out at almost 1 million members. So as many other nations have develop actually more of a Christian orientation, it will help us to understand what is taking place in China, in South Korea, in Eastern Europe. I would even argue that it will help us understand the Islamic world more. I think that as the United States increasingly becomes secularist, it might actually put us at a disadvantage in terms of understanding people of other faiths as well. For example, one of the objections by many Islamics, and again, don't misinterpret this to say I'm blaming the United States, okay? I'm just saying it's important to understand people of other faiths. But one of their great objections to what we have here in the United States is that we use, well, let's keep this G-rated, okay, appealing women to sell cars and to sell alcoholic beverages and so forth, and they find that highly objectionable. And a lot of people, in the United States can't really relate to that. They say, well, what's the problem with that, okay? And, and I'm not saying which belief is appropriate or inappropriate, but it's at least important for us to understand where people of other faiths are coming from. So that's my primary interest, is the Bible as literature, but also I'm interested in something that's very relevant to here in Louisiana, and that is the issue of school choice and school vouchers. One thing that has been determined, and in fact it surprised me, because when you do statistical analysis, you have to address it with a certain degree of humility. If the numbers indicate a certain direction that surprised you, you have to go with the numbers. Okay, it's either you change or the numbers change, and guess what? The numbers aren't going to change, especially in a meta-analysis that's every study that supposedly has ever been done on a given topic. And one of the things that I found, and this then points back to the background that I gave you, is in faith-based schools, the achievement gap is 25% narrower than in public schools. And a lot of the school choice programs, in fact, nearly all of them across the United States, are geared especially to trying to reduce the achievement gap that are designed to be addressed to people of low socioeconomic status to help them do better in school. And I just think that we need to address the issue of education much more holistically. Let's face it, I want to be very transparent here, okay? People in the public sector in education tend to think of public education first. People in the private sector tend to think of the private sector first, but we need to mature beyond that and realize these are still kids. Again, I've suffered there. I've been in the inner city. I see what these children are going through. These are kids who are going through struggles, who are doing their best to achieve. And many times, whether it be the neighborhoods that they grow up in, the family situations that they're from, the crime, the racism, what have you, they don't have much of a chance. And I know some may not be able to relate to that, but if you've been there, you can see what these children are going through. They need a chance. And a lot of times, faith gives them a chance. Faith gives them hope. And faith-based schools many times can help give them hope. And I think that we need to view education much more holistically, rather than just be concerned about the public sector, the private sector. You know what? We need to be concerned about all kids in America. All kids. I'm concerned, yes, about the private sector, but I'm also at a state university. I'm very concerned about the public sector. And so I look at this holistically, and I believe that faith has a place to play in our society. And thank you very much.
So let's get a bit of a lay of the land here. Steve, are you okay with from a legal perspective of the Bible being taught as literature in our schools?
Absolutely not. No, I'm just teasing. Yes, that's unquestionably correct. What Bill said was unquestionably my understanding of the law in that area. You can teach the Bible as literature. You can teach about religion. What you can't do is you can't promote religion.
Right.
And so if you're teaching it to promote then you have a problem. You got a legal problem there, because you're infringing on the rights of the parents of those students. If you're promoting, think about it. You've got a child. You have your own views on religion. You're teaching your children a certain way. You entrust them to the schools. Then they go off and somebody else teaches them something that might be different. I think everybody can understand that would be a problem. Now, if you just say, I don't want my child to learn about the Bible as literature, I don't think that's a very good objection for all the reasons Bill stated, that it is a fairly important, to say the least, historical document that has all kinds of importance for us. I would just disagree with Bill a little bit as a matter of policy, though, which is that, and I think that professional educators will tell you it's really hard to cover everything that's out there already. And so, what was it they say about Aristotle? He was the last man who read everything, and it's really hard to understand lots of things. I wish, frankly, my biblical, I like English literature a lot. I'm rereading Moby Dick. There's tons of the Bible in there. I wish my understanding of the Bible was stronger, but I'm not sure that I would have given up which courses I would have given up to get there, and maybe some of that has to be on an elective basis. And I'll give you my second piece of valuable advice here today, which is statistics. It's an increasingly important area of study. Everybody needs to understand some statistics in the business, medical, legal, everything has some sports statistics. And so, so it's just a question of what you have time for. There isn't time for everything. So So I question whether there is a time for robust Bible as literature, but that's just an observation. It's certainly legal.
Yeah, and so philosophically, Barbara, any problems with teaching the Bible as literature?
There, not philosophically, no. There are a couple things. Is this actually on?
Yeah, it's on. It doesn't go in here. It goes in, so you don't have to worry about moving it. They've already got it all set up.
Okay.
Don't
All
worry.
right. This is interesting for me because right now in my History of Ideas class, I'm teaching Augustine's part of Augustine's commentary on the Book of Genesis. I don't know if you realize that he wrote a book about the interpretation of the Book of Genesis, and so that's my students really are loving this. This is my History of Ideas class, and what Augustine said, Augustine's message in there, he's actually addressing the question of biblical interpretation, and his advice is you should not interpret the Bible literally. This is fascinating for me because I'm teaching this right now. And he points out all the problems with just interpreting the first sentence. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Just the first sentence. So this is really interesting for me because I'm teaching this stuff right now. One of the things that I think you always have to do, and this was actually my job in the Kitzmiller trial, is look at the facts. Look at what the facts are, look at history, right? Because people very often forget history. So I'll mention a couple of things, one from history and one some information right now. You know, I grew up reading the Bible, and it's an absolutely wonderful book. It's just that there's no such thing as the Bible, right? There are many of them, right? So which one are you going to take as the right one? Well, that's another question, but that is a question. But in 1844, and this is sort of, you know, this is an area where Steve lives. You ran Philadelphia, okay. Beginning in about 1840, Catholic children in the Philadelphia Bible public schools were being forced to read the Protestant Bible in 1840. And their parents tried to get something done about that because these were children who, you know, they used a different Bible. And they were not happy with that, so the parents tried to, you know, get some redress, and this went on for several years. And finally the whole process broke down. And the Protestants who objected to the fact that the Catholics objected to the reading of the Protestant Bible in the public schools began rioting. So there were several days, and this is known as the Philadelphia Bible Riots of 1844, and this all happened because of Bible reading in public schools. And it was why the Catholic Church then developed their own system of parochial schools. So Steve's got a couple of kids. If they had been in the public schools in Philadelphia in 1844, they would have been among the children who would have been forced to read a Bible whose authority they did not recognize. And as a result, Catholics were killed by Protestants, homes were burned, and even Catholic churches were burned. So there is a history that shows why you have to be so careful, right? Despite the fact that the Bible is a wonderful book. Now, fast forward. The Texas Freedom Network is an organization that has looked at the teaching of the Bible as literature in the public schools of Texas. And Bill's right. It's legal. You can teach, and we have that in Louisiana. But you have to be very careful because that is very often an open invitation, right, for a teacher who is not properly trained or who doesn't maybe understand the Constitution to proselytize. And this has been happening in Texas. And there's Dr. Mark Chansey, who's the chair of the Religious Studies Department at Southern Methodist, is the person who did the study. So again, it can be done, and it can be done well, and it can be done right. It's just that you have to be very careful. I have seen some of the curricula that have been promoted by an organization called the National Council for Bible Curriculum in Public Schools, and those are clearly efforts at proselytizing. There are materials that teachers can use to make sure this is properly done. I have a friend who's a Baptist minister who teaches one of those classes in Louisiana, and he's very careful. He uses a carefully chosen textbook. So again, this is legal. It's just that in that particular area, okay, extra care has to be taken to make sure that the teacher is properly trained, that the teacher isn't using that as an excuse to advocate, right?
Let me ask you this, because so Bill's data, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but your data showed that there was a higher achievement in faith-based schools than in public schools. And so let's say that I'm interested in starting a school, and I've got a state where there's a voucher program set up. I'm an academic entrepreneur. One of the things that I want to do is to set up a school, and I look at Bill's data and say, well, it seems like for whatever reason the achievement gap is lower in faith-based schools. Why would it be problematic for me to set up a faith-based school and then look to attract some of the voucher dollars with that? Because where the parents could say, well, look, if I want to send my kids to a faith-based school, I can do it. If I don't want to send my kids to a faith-based school, I can choose something else. What's wrong with that if we're using public school funds to promote faith-based schools, if there are alternatives for people in the area?
Well, this is now deep into the realm of my personal opinion, which I'm happy to share with you.
Well, make it based on the law.
Yeah. Well, actually, I will. I mean, and the reason it's my personal opinion is because the voucher systems are legal, right? You can have a voucher system where you can, you pay your tax dollars, and your kids live in this community, and you can the government can set up a system where you get $4,000 voucher, and you can, instead of sending your kid to the public school, you can send them to a private school, whether it's a religious school or a Catholic school or a Christian school or a Jewish school or no religious affiliation whatsoever. So that's legal as long as there's actual choice in your community. There's real choice. So in other words, if you live in a community and the only choice there is one particular type of Christian school, that's no choice at all, really. So I think that's what the case is recognized. That wouldn't be legal. But assuming there's choice, then vouchers used in religious schools are legal. And then it comes down to just a policy question, which is why I made my flippant remark just there a second ago. And if you'd like, I'll just state what my objection is, or what I think my objection is as a policy. Or let's put it this way. It would be the question I would need to be convinced on in order to think that that was a good idea. And that is, there is not enough money in there's not enough funding for public education right now. The Philadelphia school systems are in deep, deep crisis right now. We have a deep crisis in the Harrisburg school system. We have a deep crisis in the Chester Upland school system. Chester, Pennsylvania, is the largest federal housing project in the country. It is a very large concentration of poor people. Their school system is in terrible condition right now. And the state doesn't have the money, or was unwilling to come up with the money, for political reasons, having to do with raising taxes, to help these areas. And it's really a problem. And we're all going to pay for it in the long run in increased poverty and increased people in our society who aren't prepared to contribute to our jobs. And so before we take money for this purpose, we need to make sure that we're funding the public schools correctly, which we're not doing right now. So, so if we were doing that well, then maybe I wouldn't have an objection to diverting some money to faith-based, to vouchers to pay for faith-based or any other schools. I'm not picking on them because they're faith-based. It's because it's basically money going to the private school system when not enough money is going to the public school system right now.
Now let me address that, because that's where a lot of my quantitative research rests, and I really share your concerns, consistent with a holistic approach that I believe is best. We need to be concerned about children in faith-based schools, but public schools as well. I mean, we need to be concerned about all children. Our hearts ought to go out to all children to give them the best education possible, particularly those who live in poor rural areas and the inner cities of our urban areas. As you shared with me in the car as we were driving over here, you shared that you believed, as you said, that there was a shortage of money now available, but you also shared, and I agree with you, by the way, that the money's really there if we prioritize correctly. The money is there, and it is there. It's just a matter of prioritizing. At the current time, nationwide, the average amount of money that is spent on a public school student is $10,650, which it is a lot of money. That's a lot of money, but it could go higher if we ran our governments much more efficiently. But here is where I think many times there's a misconception regarding school choice in the voucher program, especially when we remember that the vast majority, basically all the school choice programs now in place in various cities such as Milwaukee and others are focused on helping those in the greatest need who are from the poorest communities and so forth. Actually, a lot of people are concerned that money that would normally go to the public sector would go to the private sector if, for example, people were given, let's just take the number 4,000, which is pretty typical, $3,000 or $4,000 that can be used as a voucher to send one's child to a public school. Well, two things along these lines. things. First of all, if that's the case, if you give a family a voucher of, let's just say, $4,000, what that means is instead of spending $10,650 per student, okay, $4,000 goes to this family to send them to a private school. And one of the arguments actually that I think is most persuasive in opening up school choice, especially for these hurting families, is that, okay, that leaves that extra $10,650 minus $4,000, $6,650 that can therefore be used on the rest of the students. So on a per capita basis, actually, what happens is if you have school choice available on a per capita basis, it actually increases the amount of money that is available to the remainder of the public school students. That's point number one. Point number two is most of the advocates of school choice, most of the leaders, including George W. Bush and others, have said one way to even make it better is if we promised, and he said if he had initiated a school choice program, he would have done this way, that the $4,000 that would go out from the state government would be replaced by the federal government and given to that state. And pretty much everyone is on board that that's the way it should be done. So $4,000 goes out from the state to the families, but the federal government then gives $4,000 per student to that state for whatever students are in private schools. So what you have is more money going to education, the same amount of money going to public education divided by fewer students. That's on a per capita basis, students getting more, plus these other students who are primarily from the inner cities and poor areas receiving a voucher to be able to go to private school. More money goes to education as a result. It's a win-win situation. It's a win for those who are going to private schools, and they're mostly faith-based because they're the ones that are affordable, okay? Because the average faith-based school, by the way, in comparison to the $10,650 that's spent per public school student, they spend only slightly over $6,000. It's about 57% per student that is spent at the public school sector. So the beauty of it all is everyone wins. And this is the beauty of it, especially in a budget-pressed environment like we live in America. School choice can be a vehicle to take some of the pressures off of the states who are fighting over their budgets.
That sounds remarkably easy.
Can I point out? Can I just point? Which is, I with all due respect, Bill, seriously, I don't think the money's there. We have this thing called the sequester. Has everybody been following the sequester? Right? They're cutting Head Start right now. They're cutting. It's serious cuts and more to come. And so if the money was there, that'd be great. And by the way, when I said I believe that we are a very wealthy society, and that frankly I believe the taxes should be a little higher on people like me. And there's a lot of people like me who think that taxes should be higher on people like me who make a good living, and we should all be investing more in this society. And if we did that, then there might be room to do what you're talking about, which is more generalized, more funding for public schools, more funding for private schools. And that sounds to me like probably a pretty good idea, but we need the money in the first place. And that's going to require a little bit of a political change because the will's not there right now.
However,
okay. Barbara, philosophically, are you opposed to vouchers and choice? And then I think I have a follow-up when it comes to evolution, too.
Well, again, I'm sorry, I have it. I'm so used to doing it.
They're going to yell at you in the back room.
I know, but I've got my teacher's voice on. You can all hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, school choice is a misnomer. It's not the parents who get to choose. It's the schools. It's the schools who gets to choose the children, right? Voucher schools get to choose who they want to let in and who they'll turn away. So it's not a true program of choice. The other thing I think, because is my husband and I live in a parish where there's a lot of poverty, right? Okay, and also Bill's the expert on statistics, not me. So Bill knows that part. But I do try to follow this issue. And there is other research available. And what that research shows is it's not the absence of religion that determines, religion is not the factor that determines whether children do well in school. It's poverty. It's how many resources are available to the family. Because one of the things that we know is that in children in public schools who are not poor, you're right, schools who serve a population of children in which the parents are able to take proper care of the children, those kids do fine in school. Public schools that serve populations of very poor children, those are where the kids are struggling. And it's because of the lack of resources that the families have. I mean, that there is research that establishes that too. So one of the things that's happened in Louisiana, we are now funding faith-based schools, and many of those schools are teaching children that humans and dinosaurs walked on the earth at the same time. So that's hardly a way of improving a child's education, is to put public money into a school that teaches that kind of stuff.
But Barbara, I'm sorry, I must respectfully disagree. The research has been consistent throughout the decades that even when you adjust for family income and so forth, that faith-based children do better at faith-based schools, that the achievement gap is in fact narrower. And the thing that we need to remember, and again, I understand that most people here have not been raised in the inner city, but if you break it down by ethnicity, there is one ethnic group that supports school choice and vouchers more than any other, and it's African Americans, who are disproportionately represented in the inner city. And one of the reasons why it isn't only about academic achievement, even though there is this relationship, it isn't only about academic achievement. Research has shown time and time again that faith-based schools are less likely to have problems with gangs, by a far degree. They are less likely to have problems with drugs. And in fact, nationwide data sets and meta-analyses indicate there's actually also more racial harmony in these faith-based schools than there is in public schools. In addition to that, I've also done a lot of meta-analyses on parental involvement. And yes, I would agree with you. I'm all for more funding of schooling. We're in absolute agreement on that, and that is important. Socioeconomic status is very important. But what has been shown, if you break down, as I have, socioeconomic status. There are three components to socioeconomic status. There is income, there's parental education, and then there's occupational status. How many, can I have a show of hands, how many believe among those three that parental education is by far the most important aspect of parental involvement? Just put up your hands if you believe that. Not so many, but it is the most important part of socioeconomic status. It's the parental involvement component. If you have someone at home who is able to help with children and equipped to help. And this is also one of the reasons why faith-based schools do better. In fact, it's been shown, again using statistical analysis, that if you include a parental involvement component in measuring socioeconomic status, the effect for socioeconomic status almost entirely disappears. It's very important that the parents be involved. And so I would advocate, yes, absolutely, more funding for schools, but I would also say that we need to teach parents to be better involved with their students, and that the teachers can help that too. Sure, income is important, money is important, no question about that. I think we're all agreed that more money for education is far better than less, but it's not only about money. We've been trying that for decades now, and parental involvement is one of those factors that is also very important. And here again, in terms of reducing the achievement gap, now this is one of the reasons, in fact, why I've done a lot of speaking for the Obama administration, because I will share with you that I have a lot of different degrees, and I'm not especially, proud of that fact. Sometimes I'd say, God, make up your mind. I was really the one who had to make up my mind, but I have backgrounds in economics, psychology, education, history, and I used to think it was a disadvantage. But then what happened with the achievement gap is I would read education journals, and they'd have educational solutions to the achievement gap, and it would help somewhat. And I'd read economic journals, and they would have economic solutions to the achievement gap. And that was part of it. And there'd be psychology journals and so forth, and faith-based journals. And all would reduce the achievement gap to some degree. But because I read journals from all of these disciplines, I began to realize, you know what? If we really want to reduce the achievement gap, we need a broader approach, a holistic approach that addresses the economic, the educational, all of these factors. The parents, we need to get them involved. And that's why I've been, invited by, both the previous administrations and by former Clinton administration officials as well, because there is now an understanding among our leadership that if we want to reduce the achievement gap, if we want to reach those children who are in the greatest need, we need a more holistic approach to addressing the achievement gap. And money helps, but it only helps somewhat. And these other factors are important too. So I would advocate a holistic approach. I think that the achievement gap is one of the most urgent issues addressing this country, both socioeconomic and racial. And faith is part of it, family is part of it, economics is part of it, but we need a holistic approach if we really care for these kids.
Shall we take a couple questions? We've got about 15 minutes
Sure.
left.
Sure.
One and then two. With the question, just pause for a second, let them turn on the mic in the ceiling, and then you'll have to speak up. And then just make sure that, let's not do any follow-up questions because it's tough with the mic. So Wilson and then, yeah.
Professor Jeynes, I have my question is, you keep saying that faith-based schools do much better than public schools. I suppose my question is, what evidence do you have that suggests that it's the faith component and not something else about the schools, which is the reason why students achieve more?
Very good question. Wilson is the name?
Yes.
Yes, Wilson, I appreciate that question. It's a very good question. In statistical analysis, there is a way to control for various variables. So when you run a statistical analysis, it'll, just without controlling for various variables, it'll give you certain results. And let's just say that doing it that way, the religious schools are here, the students are here, and the public schools are here. But anyone who, does it with integrity, and I very much believe in integrity, has to control for other factors. So you control, for example, for the selectivity issue. You control for even parental involvement, which some might say, well, you shouldn't control for because, one of the advantages of faith-based schools is they do encourage parental involvement. But I even control for that, just to be on the conservative side. I'd rather get an effect that's too small rather than too large. You control for socioeconomic status and race, and even when you control for those things, the gap still, there is still that advantage for faith-based schools. It's not as large as when you don't control for these things, but it is still there. One of the beauties of doing analysis with nationwide data sets and meta-analyses is then you can also do follow-up research asking some of the questions that you're asking. So for example, a lot of the students in faith-based schools have more of a sense of purpose in their life. There's a lot of emphasis on love. The students say that in the responses, that they feel more loved by the teachers in the faith-based schools. In a faith-based school, for example, there's some things you can say to students that you can't say in the public schools. For example, God doesn't make junk, okay? You can do it. Now, you say that in the public schools, you're going to get in trouble. And of course, Christianity, the central theme of Christianity is love. I mean, the most cited, according to the internet, the most cited verse in the Bible is John 3:16. Probably no surprise, okay? For God so loved the world. And God in the Bible could have identified himself a number of ways, but she could have said God is rich, but instead he chooses to say God is love. So the beauty of these meta-analyses and the use of nationwide data sets is it gives you the variables to examine what is it about the faith-based schools that enables students to do better. And absolutely, it's, part of it's socioeconomic, part of it's parental involvement and, these other things. But there are some definite pointers that you can point to, especially regarding a purpose in life and feeling loved by the students, that makes a difference. And I will add just one final thing that will refute a stereotype that many people have, because clearly there are some really upper class, especially independent private schools, but I've examined more the faith-based schools. And if you just focus on faith-based schools, the average income of a family coming from a faith-based school is only 18% higher than a family going to a public school. And a lot of people have this stereotype that it's a huge difference. But if you were to ask people who have been sent to faith-based schools, well, did your parents send you there because you were loaded? The typical response, and I've asked this of many people over the years, but no, the typical response is no. My family decided we'd only have one television set, that we wouldn't have so many cars, that we'd live in a smaller place because education was important to them. So those who send their children to faith-based schools are not as wealthy as many people think. So great question, though, Wilson.
Let's take another. Yeah, you were up before.
Are there countries that do not have faith-based schools and the students are smarter than American students? And if that's the case, what would you think?
Okay, I just want to make sure I got your question correctly. Are there schools that don't have faith-based schools where the
other countries
that don't have them, right? That don't have them, yeah, sure, absolutely. If you, again, I'm not here to say that faith is the only factor that improves achievement. There are a host of factors. So absolutely, if you have a number of schools many schools in Japan and China who tend to do very well on academic achievement, the Netherlands, you have a lot of schools where the students, public school students, do better than our public school students, and there are a lot of factors that go into that. I mean, you can make an argument that we need a longer school day or what have you, and a longer school year. So I'm not about to hear, given that I have a background in so many disciplines, I'm not about to say to you that if we just go to school choice, it'll solve all our problems. Absolutely not. I think it is a very small slice of the picture. Again, I think we have to do a lot of things to alleviate the achievement gap. There is also one problem, by the way, in international comparisons that I should point out just to be fair. And again, I really believe in being transparent, and that is that many nations do not give their test to a wide cross-section of the student body, only to the upper half or upper two-thirds, whereas in the United States, we give it basically to all students. So many times our schools in the United States look more depressed than they actually are. But there are many factors that go into raising achievement.
Questions is it for Professor Forrest or?
For everyone.
Oh, for everyone,
I'll
okay.
be very brief. I'm not going to take up all
Okay.
the time. First of all, I would like to say that I disagree with 99% of what I've heard from everyone up there.
Me too?
No, you
Okay.
As far as teaching the Bible in school, I'm 100% against that unless you teach the other major religions too. Have a religious education, not a Bible education, because all you're doing is indoctrinating the students. So I'll let that go. I had all my notes here, but it boils down to one thing. We talk about intelligent design or intelligent creation. My question is this. What do you mean? Let's get back to words. What do you mean intelligent design? Number one, what do you mean by intelligent? What do you mean by design? When you say design, somebody or something is designing something, right? So something had to exist for them to design. That's my question. If we're going to teach, we want the young people and the college students to have open minds and to study and make up their own decisions. Don't stick it in the textbooks or go into courts, because number one, who are these people in the courts today? Look at the decisions they're making. So we've got a problem in our court system. But I would like someone to just address intelligence. What is intelligence? What is it?
Barbara, would you
Anybody?
like to
Okay. Are you asking, I'm sorry. Are you, I've done this so many times, and,
I think I know. I think I can answer this question if you want. I think I know what he's getting at.
okay, I was going to ask him to clarify his question. Are you asking how the proponents of intelligent design themselves understand it?
No.
How they define it?
How do you understand it? When you use the word creation, do you assume there's a creator creating something, right?
The term creation presumes a creator, yes, sir. That term does, yeah.
Okay. But that's based on a belief, not a fact. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's a religious idea.
It's a fact. I mean, a belief.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And if I might just briefly address the other component of your question, yes, I also favor comparative religion. Two things, though. If you look at the comparative education courses that are now offered in our public schools, and I've done this, I've done research on this, and you ask the student what religions are taught, they tend overwhelmingly to be other than Christianity. There's just the expectation. There's a lot of interest among many American students, and especially Islam, but also Hinduism and Buddhism and so forth. So they tend to emphasize the non-Christian religions much more, and this is just based on statistical analysis, asking the students what was taught. So they serve a different purpose. The reason why we advocate the teaching of the Bible as literature in addition to that, because again, I'm all in favor of that, But the reason why we would support something additional to that is, number one, again, the emphasis is on non-Christian religions, and we think the Bible needs to get some place too in the curriculum. And the other thing is, unquestionably, the Bible, at least in terms of American history, has had more of an influence, say, than the Quran. So, if you were to talk about Iran or something, surely you would expect that a school in Iran is going to, address the Quran more than it would the Bible, although I think the Bible would have a place there too. So I support both kinds of courses, and I think they
prefer the Bible. So
no, I think
don't have the same standing with each.
Well,
is that correct?
Well, I think there should be a comparative religion course. Okay.
The question I just asked, though.
Well,
do you feel they're equal to Christianity?
The other religious books,
yes,
in terms of their in terms of them being religious texts, absolutely. However, in terms of teaching literature and history that is relevant to this country, it's only natural that certain countries that have more of a Buddhist flavor. Like if I were to go to Japan, I would not encourage them. I would say your central texts need to be consistent with your history so that you can understand your own history. So if I were to go to Iran, I'd say, of course, you need to have more teaching on the Quran. It's only part of your history, and the same I would say with the United States.
So let me just to clarify. So from your data analysis, when it comes to faith-based schools and the advantages that one gets, does it matter if it's a faith-based school where it's Christian, or if it's Muslim, or if it's some other school, or has your analysis shown that Christian schools are better? From what I understand, that it doesn't matter what the faith is, that faith-based schools are. But I just want to clear, is that correct?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. It's semi-correct. When you look at meta-analyses, anytime that there is a meta-analysis, you are dependent on the studies that have been done. Okay, does everyone follow that? Because a meta-analysis, you're taking all the studies in existence and combining them. The one disadvantage, because every type of research has its disadvantage, and a meta-analysis does as well. One disadvantage of a meta-analysis is if it has not been addressed that much in the body of research, there aren't as many studies available. So, the overwhelming number of studies have focused on Christian and Jewish schools because these are the ones that are greatest in number. And if you include Islamic and Hindu and Buddhist schools and include them also, you still get more or less the same impact. So that's the yes part of the question. The no part of the question is, in statistical analysis, I think most of you are familiar with the fact there's a level of statistical significance. Are people familiar with that? Okay, statistical significance means that it reaches a level that it almost never would occur by chance. Okay, that's what's called statistical significance. But to reach that level, you need a certain number of studies. So if you include together, and see if you can follow me on this, if you include together in one package Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, Jewish, etc., Hindu schools, put them all together, you reach statistical significance, which indicates that schools of faith do have a positive impact. But if you take Islamic and Buddhist and Hindu schools alone, okay, it doesn't reach statistical significance. Having said that, however, the only reason I think it doesn't reach statistical significance is because there just aren't enough studies, okay? And you have to, the more studies you have, the more likely you are to reach statistical significance. Does everyone follow that? Have I lost anyone? Okay, so I'm trying to present it as objective a way as I possibly can. I think if there were enough studies, you would have statistical significance, but when you combine them, you get you do get an effect.
On that note, we're out of time, but I want to please join me in thanking all three of our panelists.